me and Sydney looked at each other, and we went to Parker's file cabinet, and together we got the combination, and we went to the safe.
What did you see when you opened the safe, Jesse?
I saw the gun, and it was sitting in the safe right next to box bullets.
Jesse, I just want to be clear where that box of bullets was. Can you please explain what it was?
It was right there in the safe, sitting next to the gun. And we were being so stupid. I remember looking at that gun, just thinking about it like it was a toy. Like it wasn't actually real. It was just, a Nerf gun or, I wish I had known how serious it was. We took it out and we were playing with it. And Sydney, she opened the part of it, the cartridge that comes out, and she was opening it and closing it, and I picked up a bullet and I put it in, I guess to see where it would go.
Jesse, I'm sorry I have to ask this. Why would you load the gun? What were you guys doing?
I wasn't thinking about it like it was a real gun, like that bullet could do something. My mom had told me over and over again that guns weren't toys, but I was thinking about it exactly like it was a toy.
So what did you and Cindy do next?
We just pointed it at things, held it in our hands, got bored with it, set it down, turned on the TV, and she was watching some cartoon that I told her I didn't like, and I got bored, and so I said, Sydney, let me see the gun. She was just watching the TV, and she did it so quickly. She grabbed it and she tossed it at me, and it was coming at me, and I just reached my hands out and I grabbed it, and there was a huge bang, and I screamed as loud as I could, and the next thing I knew, she just fell over. I don't remember. I remember I called my dad, the police came, there were all sorts of people in the house. It was a whole blur, and I just couldn't even, I couldn't even believe that what was happening. What was happening?
Jesse, you made a statement to the police. Is there any part of that statement that is true?
I remember making that statement. And in it, I wrote that Sydney didn't want to play with the gun. And that it was all my fault. And it was my fault. But when I wrote that statement, I was so stupid. I was just thinking to myself, oh my God, Sydney's gonna get in trouble. Sydney's gonna get in trouble. We've done something terrible. And I didn't want her to be in trouble. I wanted to make it better.
Jessie, is there anything you regret about that?
We should have never taken the gun out. I should have listened to my mom.
No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Jesse, you play a lot of video games, correct?
Yeah, I do.
These are violent, first-person shooter video games, right?
I haven't played any video games since the accident, but back then I did used to play some video games that were rated mature and that, were first-person shooter games.
They were rated mature because in these games you would just walk around and shoot people with guns, right?
That was about it, yeah.
In these violent video games, you couldn't purchase them for yourself, could you?
They were mostly gifts, yes.
They were gifts from your mother, Hayden Duran, correct?
Some of them were, but not all of them.
Right. Hayden Duran had to purchase those violent video games for you because you weren't old enough to buy them yourself.
Yes, but those weren't the only video games that we played. I had sports video games and,
But those were the video games that you would play with your mother, Hayden Duran.
I played all of my video games with my mom.
Right. And when you were playing these violent video games, you were just 10 years old, correct?
Some of them, yes.
Now, when you were in school, you got into a little bit of trouble, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I didn't have a whole lot of friends at school. And, it was a new school, and we just moved. I was having some trouble, yeah.
Right, and you got suspended for a week, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character testimony.
Your Honor, this is not going to show action conformity therewith, but is admissible under Rule 404B because it goes to Hayden Duran's knowledge. Specifically, our claim is negligent parental supervision, so Hayden Duran had the knowledge of this incident, but you had the knowledge of the child's violent tendencies, but did nothing about it.
Sparks?
Your Honor, opposing counsel is trying to demonstrate that Jessie Duran was violent in the past and is attempting to show that she was violent also on August 18th. You need to show conformity therewith, that character trait.
Sounds to me like she's showing it to show that Mr. Duran should have notice of it. Do you dispute that?
We would respond that she's trying to imply to the jury that Jessie was violent before.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Again, Jesse, you were suspended from school for a week,
I was, yes.
but you were not punished at home, were you?
No, I took the suspension really hard, and I was really upset afterwards. My mom didn't ground me.
Right, your mom didn't ground you, nor did she take away those violent video games, correct?
No,
You also completed a drawing at school, correct?
yeah, we did a lot of drawings at school.
Your Honor, permission to approach the bench to retrieve plaintiff's exhibit. Permission to approach the witness.
Granted.
Jesse, I'm showing you a copy of this drawing that you completed at school. This is the drawing of you and your gun, correct?
Yeah, this is one of the things that I drew in school. I was 10. It was supposed to be funny.
Right. But in this drawing, you're in love with your gun, correct?
I mean, I write, I heart my gun.
Right. And you're shooting other kids, correct?
No, I never shoot anyone. I mean, I think you're talking about the middle box, but it says I'm scaring all the bad kids away. I mean, I was 10. It was stupid. It wasn't funny. It was supposed to be funny.
Right. But this drawing showing you shooting other kids, it was placed on the refrigerator in your home, yes or no?
My mom put all my drawings in the fridge.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time. this time. I approached the witness to retrieve and retain.
Okay. Any redirect examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Jesse, can you tell us why you made that drawing?
Like I said, I mean, it was supposed to be a joke. It was a comic book. It's not funny. But I didn't know that whenever I wrote it.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Jesse, you're excused for your testimony.
Your Honor, defense asks for permission to publish Defense Exhibit 1 to the jury.
Remind me what Defense Exhibit 1 was?
The text messages.
Granted.
At this time, Your Honor, defense calls Dr. Logan Bashir to the stand.
You may proceed.
Good evening, Dr. Bashir. Can you introduce yourself?
Well, sure. My name is Dr. Logan Bashir.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Bashir?
Well, I am a professor. Excuse me. I'm a professor at the University of Arizona School of Law, and I also run my own consulting firm called Bashir Strategies.
What is Bashir Strategies? What kind of consultation do you do?
Well, Bashir Strategies is a consulting firm that I created back in 1994 that kind of deals with my specialization. I specialize in juveniles and generally false statements, false confessions, or witness recall issues. I generally work in the criminal justice system trying to help juveniles and their families make their way through it.
What exactly is witness recall?
Well, witness recall is when, it's basically the fact that after something happens, in as little as an hour, you can forget key details. And since the criminal justice system and courts in general rely so much on witness statements, it can cause a problem.
I want to talk about your educational background before we get into why you're in today's case. What kind of educational background do you have?
Well, I got my bachelor's and my master's from the University of Oklahoma in psychology. And then I went on to the University of Colorado School of Law to get my law degree. And then I went to Stanford, and that's where I got my PhD. And that's when I actually took all of my previous education and specialized in the juvenile and the false confessions and the witness recall.
And why are you in trial today, Ms. Dr. Bashir?
I was actually retained by Hayden Durand when she believed that the incident on August 18th of 2010 could have taken her daughter into the criminal justice system. But I also consulted on this case.
Have you ever consulted in court cases before?
Yes, I have consulted on 65 separate cases. 51 of them were criminal cases, and I've testified in court 6 separate times.
What methods do you use whenever examining false confessions?
Well, when we first look at a statement and try to determine if it was a false confession or it could have been a false confession, we look at the circumstances surrounding that confession and the confession itself to see if certain hallmarks were present.
What kind of hallmarks do you look for?
Certain things as aggressive police tactics, the age of the person giving the confession, whether or not they were alone with the police at the time, different circumstances that could impact what the person says.
Are these the standards used for professionals in your field?
Yes, we all use them.
I want to talk about today's trial. What kind of hallmarks did you find in today's trial, if any?
Well, specifically in today's trial, I was asked to look at Jessie Duran's statements on August 18th that she made while in police presence, and any other statements she made after the incident. I looked at her written statement as well as her mother's affidavit and the police officer on scene.
And from these affidavits and these evidence that you looked at, what kind of hallmarks did you find?
The hallmarks that were present in this case were juvenile, basically Jesse was a juvenile at the time, and the fact that the police had Jesse alone when she was making this statement.
I want to break these down and talk to them one at a time. First, let's talk about Jesse's juvenile status. Why is that of importance?
Well, after DNA became a big deal and we saw that there were a lot of false confessions that have been given in the criminal justice system, people did research. And it's come to our attention that a large percentage of false confessions are actually done by children under the age of 18.
How old was Jesse at the time of the incident on August 18th?
Jessie Duren was only 11 years old when she gave her statement on August 18th.
Why do juveniles make false confessions?
Well, simply because they're more naive, more malleable. People can kind of convince them to change their opinion of what happened.
Now I want to talk about the other hallmark you mentioned, the presence of police. How is that of concern in today's trial?
Well, as I was going over the evidence that I received, I saw that Jessie was actually left alone with police officers before she made this statement. What happened was Jessie was brought into a room by Officer Dale Williams. He sat Jessie down and then left her alone with two police officers. Now, being alone with a police officer, especially for a juvenile, can lead to a false confession.
How does that lead to a false confession, being alone with the police?
Well, specifically in this instance, I saw signs of minimization. That's when somebody comes in, generally an interrogator, and they kind of convince the person that they did something bad. And then they use that to actually shape their confession.
What conclusion did you reach in today's trial?
Well, any statement made by Jessie Duren to those investigators could have been a false confession.
We heard earlier that Jessie wrote a false confession to the police. Does this mean that it's, in fact, Jessie lied?
No, see, false confession does not mean that somebody is a liar or that they lied. It just means that the wrong circumstances happened at the right time.
What does this mean for any other statements made after the fact on August 18th?
Well, while I was doing my review, I saw that it was possible Jessie Duren actually made statements to a witness, a neighbor that day after the incident. Those statements could also be false.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Bashir.
You were named the criminal defense of juveniles like of the year. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's what I generally do.
Okay. I'd like to move on about your compensation for your expertise. Your hourly charge is $400 an hour. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you have spent at least 200 hours of researching this case. Is that correct?
Yes, but the majority of that was actually back in 2010 for the criminal case that Hailey and Duren thought Jessie might be a part of. Only about 40 hours were spent on this case, the civil case.
But in all, you spent 200 hours researching things about this case.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so altogether, prior to today, you would have received $80,000 for your time.
Yes.
And so today, you're actually charging Ms. Duren for $2,000 for travel expenses. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And an additional 20 hours just for testifying in the case today.
Yes, my time to come and testify.
So in all, you're receiving roughly $90,000 for your time.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to move on to your research. Researchers like yourself, you've come up with factors that are generally associated with false confessions. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Those are those hallmarks that I was talking about.
Correct. And you never talked to Jessie Duren, though, directly, did you?
No, ma'am.
You were denied that. You never came after. Were you? Let's go over those factors that you mentioned earlier. One of those was aggressive police tactics. Is that correct?
That's one of the hallmarks that we look for. I wasn't certain if it was present in this scenario, though.
So when you looked, you didn't really find any evidence of aggressive police tactics. Is that correct?
No, but actually, I only got my information about the police from an officer that was present on the scene, so I'm not exactly sure what happened, so I can't make any comments on that.
But to your knowledge, there's no evidence.
No, ma'am.
Another factor that you look at is isolation. Now, earlier you said that Jesse was put in a room with police officers,
Yes, ma'am.
but it wasn't really an unfamiliar scene to Jesse. He'd been there before. So really, can you say that he was isolated and by himself?
See, isolation in my field is a little different than what you might think isolation is normally. Normal people think isolation is when you're by yourself. But in this field, isolation is generally when somebody is taken from their home and taken to the police, the police office, and taken and put into a small room, windowless room by themselves. That did not happen in this circumstance.
Do you recall your report that you made for this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I enter these into evidence?
Any objections?
Would you like to?
Yes. No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, no objection, okay.
It's the no objection.
Okay, no objections. It's admitted.
Can I first little witness? Okay. When you discuss isolation in your report, you say, I'm quoting, there was no isolation as the term is generally used. Jesse Duran spoke with the officers in a familiar family home rather than being transported to the police station. And the dining room in which Jesse wrote the statement is neither cramped nor windowless. So therefore you don't technically find this factor.
I believe that's what I just said.
Okay. Another factor that you research is physical threats. Did you find that in this case?
No, I didn't find that the police physically threatened Jesse Duran.
And you didn't find any verbal threats either. You also didn't feel that Jesse was coerced into making this confession.
But not from the evidence I got.
And was there any intellectual disability that you found with Jesse?
No, Jesse Duran does not have any intellectual disabilities.
You found that he had average intelligence.
She does, yes.
She does. And you also found that the length of Jesse's interrogation wasn't unusual, or
No, it wasn't excessively long.
but the only factor you did find to raise red flags is Jesse's age.
A juvenile status and minimization, I believe, were both present in this circumstance.
Okay. So you spent 200 hours on this case, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am?
But you didn't reach a conclusion after all this research.
No, I could not conclude whether or not it for sure was a false confession, but there is a possibility that it was.
But you cannot reach a conclusion that's very set and conclusive.
I concluded that there could have been a false confession. That was my conclusion.
So, in your report, you say, sorry. You're saying that you did think that there could be, but you're not saying that there was.
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
correct? Okay, no further questions.
Any redirect examination?
No, Your Honor. At this time, I ask that Dr. Bashir be allowed to sit down.
For your time, doctor?
May I retrieve Mom? Permission to retrieve Mom.
Granted. Does the defense have any further witnesses they wish to call?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Dr. Ash DeRosa.
Dr. Rosa?
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Could you tell the court your name, please?
My name is Dr. Ash DeRosa.
What do you do for a living, doctor?
I'm a tenured professor at Midland State University, and I'm also a wrongful death consultant, as well as serving on the State of Midland's Board of safe gun policy and legislation as the co-director.
What qualifies you to be a wrongful death consultant to work with gun legislation?
Well, I received my master's in public health from Tufts University, and then I went on to receive my doctorate in health policy and legislation from Midland State University.
Do you have a specialization?
Yes, I specialize in guns in homes with children.
So, have you been published on gun safety?
Yes, I've been published in 30 peer-reviewed articles, specializing in homes with children with guns.
What about experience in the legal system? Have you testified in court before?
I have been retained for cases such as this one 30 times, 3 of which went to trial and required my testimony.
Now that we talked a little bit about your qualifications, I'd like to talk about why you're here today. Could you tell the jury?
I was retained by Hailey and Durant to evaluate the circumstances surrounding the shooting on August 18, 2010, and also to evaluate the legitimacy of the plaintiff's claims from a gun safety perspective.
How exactly do you perform this analysis?
Well, generally, I take testimony and facts about where the gun was stored, under what conditions, facts of that nature from sworn testimony, interviews, things of that nature.
Is that what you had in this case?
Yes.
And so once you gather that information to perform your analysis, how do you get from information to conclusion?
Well, I apply methodologies that experts in my field generally do. Specifically in this case, I start from the moment of the shooting, and I take steps walking backwards and analyzing all the circumstances in the specific case up until the moment that the gun entered the home.
Did you reliably apply, that methods to the facts and data that you collected in this case?
Yes, I did.
And did you reach your conclusions today to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, I did.
All right. I'd like to talk a little bit about gun risk generally, okay? How would you define it?
When there's a gun in the home, the risk of homicide increases anywhere from 40 to 170%. And we like to categorize those risks into 2 facets: gun storage safety and gun handling.
Okay, I'd like to talk about that first one, gun storage risk. What exactly is that?
Well, gun storage risk is the risk associated with where you keep a gun, what you keep in proximity to that gun, who has access to it, things of that nature.
So what about those factors affect the safety of the gun storage?
Well, specifically who has access to the gun, it matters tremendously how many people know, just because intuitively, if more people know about where a gun is or whether or not it exists even, more people are able to use that gun.
Applying that to this case, what evidence did you find about the accessibility of the Parks gun?
Well, initially, only Andy and Lee Park were intended to know the existence of the gun or of its location, but the more people became privy to that information as time passed, from the babysitter to Hailey Durant, even to the children. And the children actually became privy not just to the existence of the gun, but to its placement.
What impact does this increased knowledge have on the safety location of the gun?
Well, like I said, intuitively, if more people know about the gun, then more people are able to gain access to the gun and then later misuse it.
You mentioned another element of gun storage risk is what's around the gun. What exactly did you mean by that?
Whether the bullets are stored with the gun, generally.
Applying that to this case, what evidence did you find about the bullet location?
I was unaware. I was not told where exactly the bullets were stored.
What if the bullets were stored in the safe with the gun? What impact does that have on its safety?
Storing guns with bullets is extremely irresponsible. Even the most cursory internet search will tell you that much. Simply because, especially in homes with children, if a child somehow happens to gain access to the gun, but there are no bullets, then obviously that's the end of that. Nothing can happen, the gun can't be fired. But if there are bullets there, then that safety cushion is removed. And you're essentially asking for a tragic accident to happen.
I know you weren't here, Dr. DeRosa, but we actually heard from Jesse Duran that the bullets were next to the gun the day that Sydney died. Is that the type of risk that you were just mentioning creates the risk for accident?
Absolutely. Children generally do not understand the seriousness of guns or how to use them correctly. So if the gun and the bullets were both available to the children, that was extremely irresponsible.
I'd like to shift our focus then and talk about the second dimension of gun risk. I believe you labeled it as gun handling risk?
Yes.
What is that exactly?
Well, gun handling risk is the risk associated with actually using the gun once you're holding it in your hands.
Applying that to this case, what evidence did you find about who handled the gun on August 18th?
In this case, from what I understand, Jesse Duran handled the gun, as well as Andy and Lee Park when they put it in and out of the safe.
What about Sydney?
Sydney also had access to the gun.
So what impact does children handling the gun have on its safety?
Children absolutely do not have the maturity level to handle guns safely. So they never should have had access to that gun.
When does adult supervision come into play?
Obviously, it's never advisable for children to be unsupervised when there is a gun in the home. Excuse me, when there is no gun in the home. But when there is a gun in the home, that's extremely irresponsible simply because generally most parents will not let their children play with a gun in the home or use the gun in the home or know of it. But if parents aren't there, then they can't monitor that.
Well, what about this case? What evidence did you find about the park's supervision of the children on August 18th?
From what I understand, they left the children home alone with the gun in the house.
And in your professional opinion, what impact did that have on what happened on August 18th?
Well, on August 18th, these children gained access to the gun and misused it. That's exactly what happened because the parents were not there to supervise. Had they been, I'm sure that this wouldn't have happened because the parents would not have allowed it to happen. But that was impossible in this case.
Thank you, Doctor. Nothing further.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Nay.
Hailey Duran agreed to pay you twice your normal hourly rate, didn't she?
Yes, that's true.
Your normal hourly rate was $250, is this correct?
Right.
But she agreed to pay you $500 an hour.
Yes, that's correct.
And additionally, you're charging $5,000 for just your testimony in court today.
Yes, I'm being compensated for my time.
So that brings us to a total of $42,500. Is this correct?
Yes, that sounds right.
Just for your involvement in this case.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about how you came by this $42,500. You only reviewed 3 affidavits in this case, didn't you?
And some pictorial evidence depicting the layout of the park home. Yes.
And these are the affidavits of Andy Park, Hailey Duran, and Danny Brooks.
Right, the babysitter.
Right. And these were the only affidavits from this case that you used to draw your conclusions.
Yes.
And you didn't conduct any interviews, did you?
No, there was no need to conduct interviews.
You didn't interview Jesse Duran?
No, there was no need to interview Jesse Duran because I was evaluating how the park stored their gun.
But you didn't look at the statement by Jesse Duran either, did you?
No, like I said, that wasn't relevant to what I was looking for.
So let's talk about the parks. You didn't go and investigate the park's home, did you?
No, I didn't. I was retained about a year after the shooting, so there was no need for me to actually see the physical park home. The pictorial evidence was enough.
So upon being given permission, you declined the opportunity to go to the park's home to investigate.
Well, from what I understood, the parks had moved out, so I wasn't sure if the home was different, if it was still kept in the same condition. So yes, I relied on the pictorial evidence taken at the actual relevant time.
And you determined that the parks owned a A.D. Baker and Company 6-shot 9mm revolver. Is this correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you would agree with me that A.D. Baker and Company is a reputable gun manufacturer. Is this correct?
Yes, that's right.
And if someone was to buy a gun, A.D. Baker and Company would be a good decision.
Right, and then you would have to follow up with proper storage safety.
Like storing in a safe, correct?
Like storing it in a safe, away from bullets, unloaded, inaccessible to children. Yes.
And the park stored their gun in a Galushi safe, didn't it?
Yes, they did.
And a Galushi safe is of the toughest safe in the country. Is this correct?
Yes, that's right. The physical safe is a very good one.
And the safe that the park stored their gun in was in perfect working order.
Yes, it was.
And Sydney was never told the combination, was she?
Well, Sydney came to know what the combination was because the parks left it in an unlocked drawer of an unlocked filing cabinet that they had actually caught Sydney looking through earlier, which was irresponsible.
But Sydney was never explicitly told what the combination was.
No, the parks never explicitly told her, but they did leave the combination written out.
Right, in a filing cabinet that was not explicitly labeled combination, correct?
No, but Sydney did express that she knew that they kept all the important files in there, and Andy Park had caught her looking through it.
But it was not explicitly labeled combination, is that a yes?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, so it's ambiguously labeled.
It wasn't labeled at all, from what I understand. Just for emergencies only was the label on the folder.
And about the bullets, earlier you said you were not told where the bullets were stored, correct?
That's correct. There was some contention from what I understand about that, but no, I didn't know where the bullets were stored.
So upon your review of the affidavit of Andy Parks, that didn't tell you that he stored the bullets separately from the gun?
Danny Brooks' affidavit did say that they didn't see the bullets where Andy Parks and the bullets were, so it's a little ambiguous, like I said. I didn't reach a conclusion on that for that specific reason, because the information was ambiguous.
So you couldn't reach a conclusion that they were stored together, correct?
No, but I can make the conclusion that storing bullets with a gun is completely irresponsible.
And Andy Park would have acted responsibly if he would have stored these bullets separately like he said he did.
That would be one safety precaution that is necessary to take, yes.
So let's talk about your motivations for testifying today. Other than the doubled hourly rate, you're in this. You took this case to make a point, didn't you?
I took this case because I believe in the message that this kind of circumstance sends, yes. And that message is that keeping a gun in your home isn't always just a danger to your loved ones and to strangers. It can be a danger to anybody who just enters your home.
So you wanted to advocate gun safety by being involved in this case?
Absolutely. Otherwise, Sydney Park, if gun safety had been exercised, maybe Sydney Park would be alive today.
So you're against guns, aren't you?
No, I'm not against guns. I understand that sometimes people need to have guns, people feel more comfortable with guns. I understand all of that. I am against gun malpractice, not keeping, storing guns safety.
So it's your testimony today that you are not against guns?
It is my testimony today that while I personally don't advocate having a gun in the home, I understand the reasons behind it for some people, and that as long as it is stored safely, I can't fault someone for simply owning a gun.
So is that a yes to my question?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
You are against guns, is that a yes?
No, like I said, I'm not against the ownership of guns. I am against people storing guns and handling guns in unsafe ways.
Could you please tell the jury what your professional email address is?
My professional email address?
Yes.
The link is parentsagainstguns.com, yes.
I believe it is A. DeRosa.
Right, at parentsagainstguns.com.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect examination?
No, Your Honor. May Dr. DeRosa step down?
Dr. Rose, thank you for your testimony.